Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Marquise Navarro, one of the hosts of the This Is Coaching show. We wanted to bring you something a little different this week. With holidays and everything, we weren't able to record a new episode. However, we do have some shows in the archive that never aired. If you recall the very first episode, you may remember we mentioned that originally this show had 6 hosts. Well, we had recorded a few episodes, but never got around to launching. We didn't want the work that we did to go to waste, so this week we are airing the very first episode we ever recorded, called WTF is Coaching. This episode explains what coaching is and is not, how it works, and what the benefits are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the very first episode we ever recorded.
It's like try describing an orgasm to someone who hasn't had one, right? It can get very hard to.
So what do you think life coaching is?
So I think that life coaching maybe is like trying to help someone figure out how to navigate life itself, or like the different struggles that can happen in life.
Have you ever had to coach yourself?
No, I have not.
This is Coaching is a podcast developed by 6 amazing coaches dedicated to personal growth, achieving success, and doing the impossible. From Alaska to Switzerland, our reach is far and our dedication to coaching is limitless. If you're ready to grow and succeed, this is the place for you.
Very exciting. All right, so we're here today to talk about coaching. WTF is coaching. So I'm joined with 5 other incredible coaches, and we're going to be going around. We're going to introduce ourselves. But before we introduce ourselves, I would like to hand it over to Sebastian Roland, and he is going to talk a little bit about some interesting facts he's uncovered about coaching.
Thanks, Nicolette. Yeah, I looked into the etymology of the word coach because I was wondering, why do we use that word over anything else these days? And it turns out the origins, it's a slang word from the 19th century English. It designated tutors. It literally meant coach, as in a stagecoach. And it was a metaphor for how the tutors were taking them to their destination, which was succeeding in their exams. So I thought it was very interesting. You know, it gets you where, or rather a coach gets you where you're trying to go. And I thought that wrapped it up in a nice little nutshell. And I thought it was a nice jumping off point.
Oh, that's really interesting. So now we're gonna go around and introduce ourselves and kind of share a little bit about why we're here and what coaching has done for us. So Trisha, I want you to lead the conversation. Trisha Johnson joining us from Denver, Colorado. Hey, Trisha.
Guys, thanks for doing this together. This is a great opportunity to be with great coaches. And so let me tell you a little bit about my story. I, for the last 10 years, experienced some pretty big things. The first started with a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And I, at the time, was a very negative person and could complain a lot, and I didn't do a whole lot with my life. And I went to a support group, and to my left was a woman who walked with a cane, and to my right was a man who was permanently destined to a wheelchair. And very quickly I learned that there was a different approach to both of their lives. One was very negative and one was very positive. And the man to my right was the most happy, most enjoyable person I had ever met. And I had just been recently diagnosed, and I thought, there are 2 ways that I can live this life. I can live looking at life like everything is terrible, or I can look at life and find the joy in it. And so that lesson kind of set me on the path of coaching. Didn't happen until later, but after the loss of my mother to cancer, the loss of my father to cancer, my sister going through cancer, I myself having the BRCA2 gene mutation, was having to deal with a lot of really big things. And so, yes, it's easy to say, I won't choose the negative, I'm going to choose the positive, but how do you do that? And so all the while, I'm also in education, and I have a coach. In education, a practice is very common is that you have a coach to help you improve your instruction. And so I was working on my own instruction and trying to be the best teacher I could be. And here I was seeing all the things that she was helping me do through her skills, which I couldn't really put my finger on. But every time I left excited and I improved my practice. So then I got into instructional coaching, and through the process of learning how to be an instructional coach, learn tools that were so beneficial in my own life. And so I was applying these tools all the while my life was getting better and I was achieving the goals that I had had for myself. And so then I was like, I gotta do this. This is how I'm going to help people live their best life. And so that's how I got into life coaching. And so that's kind of my story, and that's what brought me here. And I've loved every minute of it.
Wow. What a beautiful story. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. We're glad that you have brought your gifts to the world in such a powerful way. Thank you. Moving on to Sebastian Roland, who hails from Montreal, Canada. Is that correct?
Correct. Just outside Montreal. I'm a coach. I coach clients to develop their presence and leadership. Develop an authentic charisma so that they connect with the people that matter to them and make the impact that they want in their lives, essentially. And I came to coaching a few years ago through someone who coached me, essentially. Someone taught me the magic of coaching, and basically I was stagnating in my career. I wasn't going where I wanted it to go. I was a developer for a national newspaper chain at the time. And I went to lunch with one person who would eventually become a mentor, and they just they gave me an insight at that moment about leadership that opened up a whole new possibility for me, all vistas of possibility, right, for what I could do. And all of a sudden I went from stagnating to getting raises and getting promotions and learning to become someone I didn't think I could ever become. I got so into it, and I just wanted to pass that on to other people. It's so exciting to go from stuck to thrilled and excited and energized. And I just want to pass that on to other people.
Well, thank you. We're so glad that you're no longer stuck and that you're helping other people find their charisma and get unstuck in their own lives. That's awesome. What a beautiful gift to share. Thank you, Seb. Moving on to Monica. We've got Monica Riva from Switzerland.
Yeah,
so
hi.
Monica, share a little bit about your story. What has led you into coaching?
What led me into coaching was my terrible relationship with money. It's not that I was losing money or didn't have any money. It's just that from childhood on, I had, like so many people, blocks around money and blocks around because people don't talk about money really. You just pick up pieces here and there, and you just make that into your truth. So that was what I did too, and it was really creating a lot of anxiety and problems in my life. So I ended up finding a coach that helped me get out of this and really create a life that's much more peaceful. And I could actually see with this coaching how powerful coaching actually can be. So I've recreated my whole life, and I would really like to help others do the same thing. So that's why I'm here.
And money is such a powerful thing in all of our lives, right? And to be able to cultivate a healthy relationship with money is really important. And like you said, many of us aren't really raised with those tools. And so to have somebody coach you through and help you gain some healthy boundaries and relationship with money is really important. So glad that you have that gift to share with your clients and with us. So thank you, Monica. All right, moving on to Marquise Navarro, and he's hailing from Alaska.
How did I get into coaching? Well, it was by accident, believe it or not. I was in the military. I retired this past June after 23 years in the Air Force. And prior to that, I was getting out, retirement was coming, and I was like, man, I got to find something to do with my life after retirement. So I went back to school, and I wanted a master's program that was going to be beneficial, right? Something I could use. I didn't want to just get a master's program to get it, to get it. So I found this one is leadership and coaching. I'm like, oh, cool. I love the the topic of leadership. It's very interesting. And I was in a leadership position at the time, and I knew it would help me along the way, right? So as the program progressed, I'm learning all sorts of new stuff. I'm applying it at work. My troops are moving, shooting and communicating, firing all cylinders is great. And then I got to the coaching piece and didn't know what to expect, but kind of baptism by fire. So the way it was set up, you had to coach, right? You literally were supposed to coach, but the first termers weren't supposed to coach. They were supposed to be coachees so they could see how it was done. That's not how it worked. So I ended up coaching from the get-go. Turned out it was fun and enjoyable. And the students that I was coaching were bringing real life problems to me, right? Every time I coached. And turned out I was pretty decent at it. My former job has set me up great, right? Because, well, I was law enforcement and we interview people. That's what we do. We ask a lot of questions. And I realized that, this is something I could probably do for a living. So I looked into coaching, what it was, and I started as an executive coach. I created an executive coaching business. But as I was going and, to networking events and introducing myself to people, I realized that it didn't seem authentic when I was introducing myself and saying I'm the owner of this business. And I realized that the individuals that I was talking to didn't consider themselves executives. So they didn't want to really chat with me about anything. So I'm like, okay, this is weird. So I sat down, had a long, deep internal conversation with myself. Like, what am I missing? So I started thinking about where I was when I was at my best, right? As a leader. My life was good. I had, family and everything was great. There was no issues. And I'm like, I have to look at the whole person, not the executive. I have to look at the whole person. So I revamped my entire business, and that's how I got into life coaching and not executive coaching. I figure if I can help a person balance issues outside of the office, the issues inside the office will also, find some balance. The leadership will be more effective because they're happier, at home, right? Or whatever they're having an issue with. So that's how I got into coaching completely by accident. That and my wife said she had a dream of me standing on a stage giving motivational speaking. So I was like, okay, it was meant to be. Let's do it.
That's so cool. That reminds me of Bob Ross and the Happy Little Accidents.
Yes.
Happy little accident getting into coaching. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Marquise. So moving on, next I want to introduce you to Sanjay. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. It's a beautiful name. I just will ruin it. But Sanjay hails from all over the place. He's like this traveling nomad, but currently hanging out in Mexico, which is really exciting.
He's the guy that we're always wondering, like, where's Waldo? Asking, where's Sanjay?
Where's Sanjay?
Been traveling. So yeah, my story is, I started in investment banking, so really different to coaching, of course. It's a very intense environment, very cutthroat. It's all about money. So obviously Monica there's something to do with what Monica's saying here. I think people have almost like the opposite, where it's like they're obsessed with it, right? Everything's about money, like make money or save money and to get more money for us personally, and like the bonus is everything. So I kind of went from that culture to traveling, right? Like you guys pointed out, I've traveled a lot over the last decade or so, and I kind of got a chance to not think about career, which was really good. I got to live life and not really consider what I was going to do, because I assumed that I would naturally just fit back into something. I didn't know what it was, and everything would be fine. But that didn't really turn out like that. I was traveling around. I lived in Brazil for a bit, and then I moved to Colombia. And I remember just sitting in this, I was teaching these kids in high school, and there's really like poor area, and they're really nice kids, but it was very rowdy, very messy. And I remember just sitting there, and I enjoyed helping them, but I just thought to myself, what am I doing? I just felt so lost and completely, I think I was like 32 at the time, maybe 31 or 32. And just thinking, oh, what am I doing with my life? Like, I can't, this is not sustainable. It's not something that I want to be doing. I don't really feel like I'm having much impact. So coaching was something I always considered, because I was very much into personal development. And that was because I had a really bad incident giving a presentation where I just really froze up. And that made me that was for the investment bank, and that made me think like really about human psychology and the mind and why I acted in like that in that certain situation. So that led me on this path of personal development. But then I made the mistake of thinking that meant I could be a coach, right? Because I had learned so much about the brain and humans and how we operate. So I suddenly thought, oh yeah, I could be a coach. And then it's only sort of recently in the last few years when I set up my business as a high performance coach that I actually got to understand what coaching is about, which obviously we're going to talk about today. So I kind of went from this like messy, like unstructured person that loves to learn, but even though I thought I had something to give, it was more learning. It was more educational teaching. So it wasn't really coaching. And through my own coaches and my own learning and discovering more about what it really is, that kind of got me to this point. And I had to create this structure. And that's why, being a high performance coach, I'm able to help others with that structure.
That's really cool. And you must have, some kind of structure in your life with the moving and the traveling that you do to keep yourself on routine and keep your life sane. That's something that you excel at. And so it's such a gift that you're able to pass along. And the life lessons that you've had is just an incredible gift to whoever you're, coaching in the moment. And the insights that you're going to bring to this is going to be really exciting to share. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you. And what about you, Nicolette? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. So I think coaching for me was also a happy little accident. And I got into entrepreneurship over a decade ago with my husband when we started doing real estate investments, and got our first kind of like entrepreneurial mentorship with some real estate investors. And that was an interesting experience, but it didn't really do anything for me wanting to pursue coaching myself. What happened was later on, when really 9 years into my marriage, my whole world started to kind of fall apart. It was 2017. I lost my baby. I was pregnant, 23 weeks pregnant, and my little baby girl passed away in utero. The only baby girl that I've had. I have 4 boys living, thank God. But my little baby girl did not make it. And I had to deliver her in a hospital. I had to bury her. And it was really awful. It was the worst thing. It was really bad. And that kind of spiraled into what I call the worst year of my life. 2017 was a really bad year for me and the Moore household. By the end of the year, I was ready to divorce my husband. I was pretty much suicidal. I just wanted to end. I didn't want to hurt anymore. And there was a lot of hurt. So by the end of that year, things were really bad. And I remember one day, just out of desperation, I just went to YouTube and came across this video by a woman that I know everyone here is familiar with. Maybe the listeners aren't, but a woman named Lisa Nichols. And she was just sharing, I don't even remember what the video was, but it was essentially just about kind of taking ownership of yourself and creating your own outcomes. And I realized I had let the death of my daughter consume me. And it took me to a really dark place that I didn't quite know how to deal with. And so that really was a very impactful for me to just, even though she wasn't talking directly to me, her message spoke so clearly to me. And so I it didn't happen overnight, but I started getting out of my funk, and I started proactively working on repairing my relationship with my husband, repairing my relationship with my children, because it had all suffered. And I started getting back into wanting to do some type of business. I figured, I needed to kind of get out of my house. I needed to get some space for me and take my mind off of all the pain that I was feeling. And one thing I noticed was I was very drawn to helping people kind of uncover their greatness, uncover something that was unique and special about them. And that was one of the things that really lit me up, just to bring some aha moments and insight into somebody's life is just, it was healing to me. And so at one point I was at a business dinner and I was speaking to a gentleman because at the time I was like, what's my niche? And I don't know, all these foundational things that all of us as entrepreneurs ask at some point or another. And after he picked my brain for a little bit and I told him, really what thrilled me and this idea of helping somebody kind of find themselves, he was like, it sounds like you're a coach. Are you a coach? Do you want to be a coach? And I was like, what do you mean a coach? So that conversation kind of steamrolled into me looking into life coaching. What is life coaching? What is it all about? And I found that was a really beautiful fit and something I was really interested in pursuing and seeing how I could incorporate that into my business, my career, so I can go out and pay the gift forward that had helped to heal my life. I wanted to help heal others. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Nicolette, thank you so much for sharing that story. I know that it's a very personal and very intimate and very difficult still for you. And what an amazing gift you bring to the people that you serve. And so thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, coaching has been a beautiful gift for all of us. And we've all felt its repercussions in our own lives. So I'm curious to kind of evolve this conversation and move it towards what is coaching. WTF is coaching. Sebastian had gone out and he talked to a few people on the street about coaching.
In your opinion, how would you describe life coaching, or what do you think it is?
I think it's a service that people use to sort of improve their lives. Maybe there's some kind of like lack of fulfillment they're having and they want to embark on some new projects, like a bit more passion projects than career-y projects. That's what I would say.
So that's pretty interesting, right? He separated the passion projects from career projects, right? So what do you think was going on? Why do you think someone would associate life coaching with passion projects rather than career? What do you think's happening?
Well, it's interesting because right after, I always chat with everybody. So we just kept talking about other stuff and he kind of gave an observation of coaching, unfortunately off tape, about like coaching from the point of view of a Marxist, which was really interesting. And basically he was just trying to see where coaching fits into this whole wellness industry and the spectrum of things like healthy versus unhealthy, or an unhealthy image of what is possible and that kind of thing. So I think he's trying to reconcile to answer your question, Sanjay, I think he's trying to reconcile a few things, because I think he wanted to be polite also, and say like, well, he might even see those two things as two separate things, right?
Yeah, I think like it's interesting when a lot of people don't class their work, right, as something that's really fulfilling to them, right? So I think a lot of people will it's almost like they're separating life from work itself, right? So you get I know a lot of people think I go to work to be able to live, right? So I get my money and I'm able to do, with that time that's remaining, I'm able to do the things that I love. Maybe that's what, obviously we're just speculating here, but maybe that's something that was going through his mind was, life coaches for that passion stuff, but maybe work in his mind, maybe there's a belief, obviously I don't know this, but maybe there's a belief that work might not be something that he could be passionate about.
I'm going to agree with that. Like most people view work as a necessity and not something that they want to do. Very few people get to do what they want to do, and then it's not considered work. You know what I mean? I forgot who said the quote, but it's not work if you love what you do, right? And it's a true statement, because people dread going to work every day, and like, oh, that's why you hate Mondays and love Fridays, right? So yeah, there's definitely a separation, and I think for some people they have a hard time if we can transition that into the other spectrum where folks can't separate their horrible job from home, right? They take it home with them, and they create this toxic household, if you will, and don't realize it.
I think it's interesting because there's so much now online, and maybe it's my space, right? Like the space that I'm exposed to, because we've got good marketers who know how to target me. But what I see all over the place is live your dream, find your passion, and there's this big movement of this kind of language. So I find it interesting that the gentleman that you spoke with used that kind of language in his explanation, because he's seeing life coaching as finding passion, whereas work, like y'all said, is kind of different. Like work isn't your passion. And maybe figuring out how you can live your passion, how your passion could be your life. And so I think that that's a really interesting angle that the guy came from.
Yeah, that is. And the marketing, it impacts us in ways we don't even know, right? It's everywhere, and we are essentially repeating those messages. It's so super powerful. So
yeah, I find myself saying, like, I want to help people live a better life than they ever thought possible. It's true, but damn it, does it sound salesy?
Yeah.
It's like, and really one of the things that he said was at the other end of the spectrum would be like Instagram influencer, right? Where all you do is sort of reflect some sort of desire, unconscious public desire back at them, the unattainable, the perfection, the that kind of thing. So yeah, that's interesting. Maybe that's a little bit a part of it too.
Coaching is still something that's done for mostly for in sports, but people are starting to get into coaching here as well, also in the space of work. So you do have a coach at work as well, and but still people do consider also here coaching as something you do to get to do something you're passionate about, find your passion. So it's in all the world, at least in Europe, it's also the same as in the States.
I think it's really interesting as we see the industry of coaching evolving, that around the world there are different levels of understanding. And here in the US, I think it's such a nebulous thing. I don't know if that's the right word, but coaching is so like, it's not concrete, and it's so intimate and so specific to the person that's being coached, that it can be very difficult to describe what the work we do is. And I think that that's part of it. So it's so big and so expansive, yet it's so specific. So yes, we definitely work with people to help them find their passions and help them align and find balance. But there's so many other things that we do as coaches. And that's oftentimes working with mindset and working around goals and pretty much all the things that make a good life. But it's not, I think people get this idea that it's so passion focused and like big and like end results, end of your life kind of goal. And it's really a lot of stuff along the way. What would you guys add to that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of intangibles in coaching. Like Trish said, it can be, even the client doesn't really realize what they're getting half the time. And it's like when you're trying to describe that to someone else, maybe you don't even know necessarily how much you're giving the client, right? Because it's all just perceptions. It's like my perception, the client's perception, your perception. And trying to explain that through words is complex, right? Because you're basically translating like their experience into words. You're dumbing down that experience into just words, and then you're using your words to describe your experience of the words they've said their experiences. So it just it's like you're going from like 4D to like 1D. Really, it's like you're compressing into this, and this is where miscommunication and all this stuff comes from as well. So yeah, I think that's part of the problem, right? It's not like you buy this, you pay 99 cents, you get this burger, right? It's that's so easy for people to understand. Whereas what we're doing, it can be very complex to explain.
No, yeah, and I see that too a lot. I see people come to me with simple money blocks, and then we have to uncover and heal really financial traumas. Basically traumas that they lived, which they don't even remember having as children, and that has created such a big financial blocks in them. But those traumas, I mean, it's hard sometimes to go through those ones, and you don't even know that you're going to go there, but you get out on the other side, and life changes, and it's amazing every single time.
Yeah, I think that's why I think stories are really a better way to try to describe, at the very least, try to describe an experience, right? Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to describe an experience, and it's like try describing an orgasm to someone who hasn't had one.
Yeah.
You know, how is that different from a sneeze? Have you ever had a sneeze? Well, it's, you know, apparently it's 10 times that, right? It can get very hard to.
Now we're all blushing.
So
I didn't know we get so spicy so quickly, Seb.
I'm sorry. I was trying to find something that is both intense and really hard to, you know, describe to someone.
I'm going to try 10 sneezes in a row, and I'll let you know.
I recommend developing an allergy to pet hair. I've heard or dust. I hear that.
That'll do it. Okay.
I was thinking it's like trying to describe the taste of food.
Yeah, that would have been a much more
describe it
PG.
with more tastes, right?
I don't know, Seb. I like it. I like it.
Yeah, it's good. It's
I
good.
loved it.
So I had a buddy of mine. I reached out to some friends to see what their definition of coaching was, and I found his answer pretty easy. I'm not going to say his name, but he said, "I've never used one, except I guess advice of friends and family, but paid someone for services I've not done. To me, coaching is used to get someone through something, or even better, coaches are supposed to be the best. So they would be used to get you to the next level, step your game up, life, sports, executive, business, etc. It's hard to listen to people as it is. People get content with their lives. It's easy to talk about wanting to step up your game, but taking action and paying someone to tell you what you're doing wrong is a whole other level. That's why I think many do not go with the coaching option." So the thing that stood out to me is he said he thought coaches are the best. And I think it goes back to what Monica said earlier, the connotation of sports, right? I think that it's the opposite. Coaches aren't the best. We're experienced, right? We've been through something, and we learned how to get through it. And through that growth, we've found a reason to help others, right? So like for me, I was all up in, loved leadership and everything, but I realized that I needed to help people, as a whole, not just this one aspect of them. And through that, I learned a lot about myself, right? I had to go really deep because, what does he say? You can't take anyone deeper than you've gone yourself. So that's, Rich Litvin and Michael Neal world right there. And this is very true. So I think we're not the best. We're just experienced.
I pulled out something a little different from that response. And it was like, you've got your friends that you can talk to, your family you can talk to. And that's where I think there's a lot of misconception around what coaches do. And yes, we have great conversations with people, but they're powerful conversations because as coaches, we are trained to listen deeply. We're trained to ask questions that open up our minds in ways we've not seen. We help our clients see blind spots. And I think there's this idea out there that coaching is about having a conversation, and the difference with the conversation that you have with friends and family is they're going to listen to you, but then they're going to tell their story, and then they're going to offer you advice. And there's just kind of this back and forth that doesn't really grow you in a way that a coach can help grow you. So I think that was a really great perception that this gentleman shared, but I think it really does speak to some of the misconceptions about coaching.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, I agree with that. And I think like there's some interesting points. So he's seeing it like Marquis said, he's seeing it as someone who's better than you, who's able to instruct you almost, right, of how to do it. But us being peers, I think, is a much sort of better platform to come from. It's we're sharing an experience, some ideas, or what you're going through, to see if there's maybe a better way to do it or approach it. And I think, like Trish said, like people think, oh, I'll just go and talk to my husband or my wife, but is your husband or your wife like jumping in and like giving their advice every time you're saying something? Are they actually letting you air out that whatever it is that you're trying to get out of your mind and kind of analyze or look at from a different angle? Are they able to understand the mindsets behind what's going on? And often the case is not, because that's not, we grow up as kids, we speak and someone else speaks back to us, and we speak and someone else, but we're not thinking in that sort of framework of like how to approach a conversation or how to allow someone to really take the floor, and it's their time, right? We're always kind of like jumping in back and forth to kind of get our own version of what's going on in. So I think there's loads of stuff here. He sounds like a high performer or potential high performer.
Yes. So I worked with him in the military. He is he got out, I think, after like 14 or 15 years. But yes, he was a high performer and someone I could definitely lean on if I needed to. Don't get me wrong, when we were younger, he was not, and neither was I. But as we grew in our military careers, we matured to a certain extent. So
Getting back to what Sanjay just said too, sometimes it's good to have a neutral person to talk to as well. Sometimes it's not talking to your spouse or talking to your friends about stuff. You won't get to a level of moving on, because sometimes just being able to share something with somebody that is completely neutral is the best thing. Yeah. And that's what a coach does.
Yeah, I think to chime in on this, one thing that I notice whenever I'm in conversation with friends or family is that generally, most people just want you to agree with them, right? About their feelings, their opinions, about how somebody treated them or whatever. And in the friend and family conversation, it's hard to challenge someone in the moment, to maybe make them reconsider their position. And, one of the ways I look at coaching is a coach will bring the person to help them pull out their own solutions to obstacles or problems or challenges that they're facing. The coach isn't there to be the best, to tell somebody what to do. The coach is there to help somebody create their own solutions for their lives. And I know as a coach, it's hard. It's challenging to be in that mindset to, instead of giving strategy, which is like my biggest downfall, right? I always want to give somebody a strategy. But instead of doing that, having the fortitude to step back, give them space to create their own solutions.
I'm glad that we brought up the sports metaphor, because as much as I try to, we want to try to stay away from sports coach because it's confusing to people, the more I thought about it, the more I realized it is actually very apt. Because when you think about it, let's say we're not talking about like pee-wee coach, right? Because at that level, you're pushing chairs around and that kind of thing, but on the ice and learning to just stay upright. But think about it like at a professional sports level, what a coach has to do. They're not going to teach their athletes new stick handling, I'm thinking hockey, I guess it's because I'm Montreal, but they're not going to teach their athletes a new a new way to handle the puck or to throw a basket or whatnot. They're going to observe them as they perform, right? They're an observer. They see them in a way that they can't see themselves. They're focused on bringing out on being their best, and the coach is there to bring out their best. Point out the things that, you wouldn't say, well, try to go left next time. You just say, hey, you know what? You're coming up against this. Did you notice that when you tend to drop your, when you're boxing against XYZ, you tend to drop your left hand a lot, and you're getting hit a lot on the right side of the face. Things like that. Which goes back to what I think Trish was saying, is like things that you can't see for yourself, the blind spots that you have. So as much as I was trying to stay away from that metaphor at some point, I think it really brings it back to this whole bringing this out of someone, bringing out their best potential. And I think it's very, very apt.
And I think one distinction that has to be made, though, because, folks always ask me, I say, I'm a coach. And like, what, football? I'm like, no, I don't coach football. I know I'm built like a wedge, but not a thing, right? So coaches do spots the blind spot. We identify it, there it is, but a sports coach corrects it. They actually tell them what to do. We don't tell people what to do, because although we are experienced, like I said, we've been through some stuff, and we may know how to get through it ourselves. The individual, we show the individual, or we guide the individual through their own discovery. You know what I mean? So instead of telling them, do this, we ask them, well, how do you think you can get through this? How do you think this situation can be different in the future, right? So, Trish.
And I think that's such a good point. And I just want to add in, I think it can be frustrating for people who are new to coaching, because a lot of times they just want the answer. And the reason we are trained as coaches to avoid giving answers is because you as an individual are so completely different than anybody else. And so you coming up with the way to handle something, or the next steps for you in your life and the challenge you're facing, or the things you're trying to accomplish, you are going to come up with the best solution ever for you, because you know you. And we just help you shine light on who that is and what you need.
Yep. Like that.
And that goes into empowerment, right? We as coaches want to empower our clients to take ownership of their lives. And that's part of it, is helping them find their own solution. And what does that do for you? What's the difference in your psyche between going to somebody and saying, hey, I don't know how to tie my shoe. Can you tie my shoe for me and show me? Or somebody being like, hey, let me kind of see if you can figure this out yourself. Maybe tying your shoe isn't the best example, but you know what I mean? Like there's an empowerment whenever you take ownership of something that's going on, a challenge that you're facing. And through the dialogue, through, exploring these concepts with a coach, you're able to go and create that own solution. And that's empowerment.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point as well. It's giving them the minimal support that they need to figure it out for themselves. And I think that's one of the most challenging parts of coaching, because what does that really mean? So for some people, they may need a bit more support, right, to then get them to figure it out and get them over that edge or over the hump themselves, right? Whereas others might need really like just the tiniest little sort of nudge, or maybe that's not even the right word for it, but just a sort of perspective shift or something like that. So getting to know your client is really important in coaching, right? It's not just, I'm good, because you can end up going in like forever, like trying to get them to this answer. Whereas maybe, or not an answer, but maybe to get them to figure it out themselves, but maybe they needed a little bit more minimal support than another client who really needs next to nothing. So it's like calibrating that and figuring out how much minimal support can I give them, because also on the flip side, if you try and help them through something and maybe you're not giving them enough minimal support, they may end up feeling like a failure because they've gone through that multiple times with you and they haven't got anywhere, right? So minimal support is essentially like, what is that, and how much do you need to give your particular client?
Sorry, using the word support, I like that, because it brings up another thing that we have to define or make a distinction between is, so coaching and counseling, right? I've run into that before, where I've had actually, counselors come up and say, "Oh, so you're basically a counselor." I'm like, no, I'm not. That's therapy, right? We're not doing therapy, because therapy focuses on the past, whereas coaching focuses on your future. So I think that is an important thing that we also should bring out, right? We don't counsel people, we coach people.
Right. That's one thing I was going to say is, we throughout the course of the show, we're going to be discussing coaching, and we're going to be elaborating, getting a lot more granular, doing use cases, kind of really looking at this coaching industry in a lot of different ways and through different angles to really help you, the listener, see coaching in a completely new way. And so we'll be digging into all these concepts as we go along, and really helping to clarify what coaching is for you. What we also want to talk about is what coaching is not. And shortly before we met today, I had approached my husband, and I said, what would you say coaching is? Because honestly, I've never asked his opinion. And he said, honestly, before I ever met you, I would have said coaching is this woo-woo, BS industry. And I really want to touch on that, because I think that may be, some people's perception that coaching is this woo-woo, whatever woo-woo means to you, right? But it could be a woo-woo profession that really doesn't have substance. And like Marquise just brought up, some people confuse it with therapy. And so what is coaching not actually, in a relationship with somebody?
Yeah, I would like to say something about that, which is, I'm to be honest with you, like completely honest, I'm not exactly sure what coaching is, right? I'm still in this process of discovering it myself as well. And I get pulled in all these different directions. I think it's one thing, and then something else comes up. And the more you listen to other coaches and how they speak, you realize it can be so many different things. And can you really define it as one thing? I don't think you can, to be honest, right? But you can have some ideas of the principles of what you can use to guide your coaching. And it's an interesting thing that Marquise said about like counseling and like going to the past, and coaching is all about the future. And initially I did think that, but to be honest, like there's certain things of like therapy that, we're not qualified to do. And we maybe can't go there, but a lot of your beliefs are formed from your childhood, right? Most of them actually. So like going back to times, like it could be like a simple regression, or thinking about, let's say Monica, right? She deals with money blocks. It's like, when was the last time, or can you think, you do it in probably a much more sophisticated way, but let's do it in a very basic way. It's like, can you think of the first time you encountered like a negative belief about money? Again, that's very raw. You would do it in a much more sophisticated way. And then let's say they say, oh yeah, you know what? When I was like 5, I heard Dad saying that he can't pay the mortgage, right? Then that is going back to the past, and that uncovers so much about what's happening right now, or it could do, right? There could be a link between what's happening right now. So I think there's a bit of a danger of just saying it's all about the future. It's like, oh, set this goal, I'm going to create this business, it's going to do the X amount of money, but they're not able to do it, or let's assume that they're not able to do it. And there's all this stuff in the past that if at least the lights shone on it, or something's done with it, that might just accelerate that, or may allow them to do it, right? Because maybe those are the blocks that are stopping them from moving forward. So I'm more in that camp, to be honest, right now.
And so, yeah, I think everything you just said was spot on, and I agree with it. And I think my viewpoint of focusing on the future is, and I've dealt with individuals. For instance, I had an individual I just ran into, met him that night at a party watching football, and he was in the kitchen kind of by himself. I'm like, all right, what's going on? Just start chatting him up. I don't know how we ended up talking about, fathers, but we did. Maybe I'm just that good, right? I just started just bringing stuff out of him. And his thing was, he didn't have a dad. He didn't know his biological father. I'm like, well, neither did I. And he was very sad about that whole thing, how his life would have been different if he knew his biological father. I'm like, how do you think your life would have been different? And I'm like, why are you focused on that instead of focusing on not being that? You've got 4 kids, right? He's like, well, yeah. Are you there for them? Yes. So you're already 10 times better than your biological father. So why are you focused on you not having a father when your kids have a father? So I'm like, we as humans, I think, let our past define us, right? And I said, you can't let your past define your future, because your past has nothing to do with your future. Your past has everything to do with where you are today, right? It's how you act today that determines your future. So if you dwell on the past, you're going to be stuck in the past. And so I think that's where I was kind of leaning towards. Like I understand the past is important and we do have to bring it up, but I think where us as coaches, where we are different than counselors, is we don't stay there. We don't pick at it and bring up more stuff. We figure out, well, you've made it to this point in your life, right? So the past really didn't affect you all that bad. You've got a great job, you've got a beautiful family, and he did, right? And I'm like, why bother worrying about it? You're not your father, right? So, and I told them, I'm like, look at me. I don't care about my not meeting my biological father. Why? Because everything that happened to me in the past brought me here today. And I refuse to dwell on whatever happened in the past, because I'm moving towards the future, because I have goals, right? And he was like, and the funny thing is, he's like, are you a motivational speaker? And I laughed. And then I was like, well, you could say that. And then I gave him a couple recommendations. I'm like, read this book and go look at this website. And then I told his wife, because he was pretty lit. And I told his wife, I'm like, make sure to remind him that he signed up for this Facebook group. So, I mean, yeah.
Sorry, I just say one more thing about that. So it's interesting because, we don't know what his experience is, right? And how he's shaped, like, his not having his father. But in like a coaching context, we could ask him, how could having a biological father actually be a bad thing, right? Or how could that have been a negative influence on your life? Because there's a lot of people in the world who have biological fathers who abuse them or beat them, put them down or whatever, right? And actually it's a worse thing, right? But it could be a worse thing, right? So it's maybe like flipping it on its head, and that's kind of part of what coaches do, right? We like to flip stuff and like, okay, so how could, even for good stuff, right? Like, okay, how could that actually be? Not a lot of coaches like to go here, but how could that actually be holding you back when they've been talking about like a really great achievement, right? That's riskier as a coach to do, right? Because then you're kind of like shining a negative, almost like, what's the negative? And then most won't do that, but there can be benefit to that as well.
Sebastian, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the idea that you're right. The playing around with the way people think is a really good way of breaking through how someone has idealized something, right? Oh, this girl I met. Oh, this man that I married. This opportunity that I have that I can't pass. This is the one. This is the thing, right? And really, what if it wasn't? What about the next one? What about X, Y, Z? And getting them to see again what we don't see, right? And I say we because we all need coaching at sometimes. We all need help understanding or seeing things that we don't see, decisions that we've made in the past that we're not even aware that we've made. And so and I think that I like the difference between what Marquise and Sanjay is saying, in the sense that I get that what Marquise is saying is don't drive looking through the rear view mirror, and that Sanjay is saying, well, and I think we're all in agreement that history provides context for why we're here. And I think we're all in agreement that at a certain point it's to move forward, right? Or it's to It's to get that person to where they are, which I think leads to a very interesting point, which is I believe personally that a coach should not try to determine, when we're talking about what we don't do, we don't give advice, I believe, mostly because we don't know what is really good for the other person, what is ideal for that person. I think it's up for them to kind of figure that out for themselves. And we just give them tools, mindsets, and challenge their visions, their hidden beliefs and stuff like that, to come up with something a little bit more true for them, so they can find the answer to them of what the ideal life is or what the ideal outcome is.
We all live our lives with glasses, like everyone's wearing their shade of glasses. And as a coach, we are able to help them take off those glasses and see things in a different way. And that's really powerful. And yeah, just like Seb said.
Yeah. Well, if I could just add to it, because it's talked about like glasses and insights and stuff like that, just to define an insight. Earlier I said, someone had lunch with me and gave me an insight about coaching, about leadership. And all it was I had made up some ideas in my head. I didn't even realize I had them about what being a leader is. Just, okay, it's someone who knows, you always have to know what to do. You have to be tough with people, probably, kind of a jerk, or distant. And it has to be bestowed to you. Like it's a role, it's authority. Someone gives you leadership, right? And then I go to have lunch with this person, and he tells me like, well, do you when you're working as part of a team, do you sometimes see where you guys need to go as a team to accomplish things? I'm like, yeah. It was okay. He says, are you able to sort of rally everyone around and get them to go towards where you know that you need to go? I'm like, yeah, I do that all the time. That's leadership. And at that moment I was like, whoa, I didn't even realize that I the new realization, it just crashed into the old one, the old beliefs, and just now all of a sudden, oh, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. And I have this thing that I can play with and go out. And once you run into a hidden obstacle and then you overcome it, all of a sudden you want another one, right? You just like, where else am I just kind of running short in my life? Where else can I start poking and see what I don't even know? That's pretty exciting.
I'd like to touch on the difference between counseling, therapy, and coaching, if y'all don't mind.
No, that's good.
As someone who personally, for years, I went to therapy because I was angry and depressed, and I had a lot of emotional problems. When I say 2017 was a bad year for me, it was the worst year I could put my finger on, but I can tell you that the years leading up to it weren't pretty either. And I was going to therapy for a long time because I was very unhappy with my husband. I was unhappy with myself. I had a lot of difficulty coping emotionally. So I've been to a lot of different therapists, and I can tell you that my experience, the difference is that the therapy sessions are there to help you cope with your life. They're there to give you medicine if you're unstable, or there are homework assignments and things that I've been given. But I can tell from my experience now, I've talked to several people about this, and I know that for some people, therapy, counseling may be the best avenue for them at where they're at in life. So that's for sure like something that should never be off the table if you need some really intensive, deep therapy, and you might need medication for a while. It's a case-by-case thing. But for me, counseling and therapy was there to remind me of how much I hated my life. And even though they gave me tools to try to cope with my life, I never walked out of a session feeling happy that I had been there. And I never walked out feeling like I was going to be okay. But in the moments whenever I was actually being coached by somebody who had these different tools that helped me create my own solutions, that's when I feel like my life started changing. That's when I felt the relief of all the weight from all the years of anger and bitterness and fatigue that had been weighing me down for so long. those moments of being coached and tapping into my own solutions, that's what woke me up. And that's given me so much room to empower myself, right? And so that's how I see, from my own experiences, you know, I can't speak to anyone else's, but that's from my experience what the difference between coaching and therapy is. What's up, Sanjay?
Yeah, I really like that. I think when you're too involved in something and you're too zoomed into something, especially your past, and if it's been a very negative past, because when it's a positive past, people don't I imagine people don't tend to like stay in it too much, right? Unless you're one of those like rock stars who you just keep want to be going back to that moment of like glory. But I imagine most people, they don't stay in their past. This is a guess, right? I could be wrong, but most people wouldn't stay in their past if it was positive. They'll be mainly probably thinking about the future or now. Whereas when it's negative, it kind of like pulls us in, right? When we think about all the bad stuff that's happened to us. And the therapy, I think obviously there's definitely a place for that in counseling, of course, and it's different to what we're doing. But is there a danger where you stay too much? Because I'm just basing this on what you said, Nicolette. Is there a danger where you stay in it too much that it actually becomes, you feel like that is your current world? And by not having maybe the awareness to become present, right? Because most of the time, unless you're suffering with something that's ongoing, most of the time when we become present, we can get that tranquility, right? And that's why in meditation, all of these things, again, if you're suffering with something that is causing you pain or like mental pain right in the moment, in that very moment, or physical pain in that moment, then maybe that wouldn't help. But I think a lot of the time getting to present moment is beneficial. So is there an argument to say you shouldn't be too stuck in the past, and maybe not too stuck in the future as well, because that causes a lot of anxiety, right? And people have we set lofty goals. Nearly everyone sets lofty goals and nearly everyone misses them. So being too stuck in the future can cause anxiety for your present moment now. So that brings up a lot of interesting stuff. Go for it, Seb.
I wanted to draw an analogy because I think Nicolette touched on something really important, which is the difference between, you know, coaching is a lot about taking action, right? And therapy is a lot about healing. And the analogy that I'm trying to work out in my mind is, imagine a sprinter. A sprinter wants to shave a few seconds off off her sprint. She'd go see a coach. If her leg is broken, she'd go see someone to help her heal that leg first, right? It's the idea about, I can perform, or I can do this, or I can address this. I just need shifts versus I need to heal. I have a pathology, mental, physical, whatever, neurological. Healing versus needing action, insight, and reflection. How does that hit with you guys?
I think that's an important distinction, because both have their place and both work very differently for different people, just as Nicolette had mentioned. And it really is about that counseling, and that therapy is about that healing process that needs to happen oftentimes before you can. I mean, just like you said, something happened to the leg, you can't shave your sprint. Like you've got to get healthy first. Not to say that you can't get coaching if you're dealing with depression, but you have to be in a space where you can be functional within moving forward. But I like that analogy, Sebastian. I think that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, I think it brings up an important point. I mean, you've already made it, but I think it needs to be said more specifically, especially to the listeners. If you have a coach, us as coaches should never try to say that we can take the place of counseling and therapy. Mm-hmm. And that is it's a very important thing for our listeners to know that. If a coach tells you, no, you don't need therapy, I can help you, just leave, don't talk to that person.
Red flag.
Yeah. So, because a coach should be very honest. If you can't coach somebody, they should tell you up front. That's why, like for me, I don't sign anything until we've sat down for a minimum of an hour to assess, right? Am I compatible with this person? Does this person actually need coaching? You know, I mean, you don't really need coaching. It's about wanting coaching, right? And I think that's also important to determine, because you can't coach somebody that doesn't want to be coached. So if I don't feel I can help the person, maybe I'm not qualified, but I know somebody who is. You know what I mean? I think that's very important. If a coach is willing to refer you to someone else, at the risk of losing basically, a client, then that is definitely somebody you want to keep in mind for the future.
I think you nailed it, Marquise. You don't need coaching. Nobody needs coaching. It's a performance enhancer if you want to. It's something that'll take you, you'll benefit greatly from it. But yeah, you can muddle through on your own. Therapy, usually you need it, right? You're hurting. The intensity of the emotion is so big that you cannot function until you have addressed this issue in your life. I like that. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. So what I'm getting from this is, and this is something I've heard before, but it's definitely processing a lot more now, is they're at a certain level in their life in different areas, right? It's not like they're in desperate need of something, but they're doing okay. They're normal enough. Like, I don't even like to use that word, but they're at a certain level in different areas with their life, right? So it's not like they're really super sick. If they're super sick, you go to a doctor or you go to a healer or whatever, right? But they're looking to make progress in certain areas, right? So they could be, let's say they don't need to go to a doctor if they're, let's say we're talking about a health coach here, right? Let's say you're 10 pounds overweight. You might not need to go to a doctor necessarily, but if you've got a problem with your kidneys, then you should probably go to a doctor, right? Whereas if you're, let's say, 10 pounds overweight, then you could go to a coach who would help you figure out what could be a strategy to get that weight down, right? So it's like, it's the gravity of the situation they're in, which is subjective, of course, but that will help you determine whether therapy or counseling is more appropriate than going with a coach. Does that make sense to anyone?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd also like to touch on what you had mentioned earlier, Sanjay, about being in the present. I think it's really important that we all constantly remind ourselves that the state of our lives, for the most part, there are always going to be external circumstance, but for the most part, where we're at in this moment, as you're listening in, is where you think you are. Doesn't necessarily mean that it reflects your reality. And there are people, when Sanjay mentioned somebody who had a pretty good life, growing up, there's not much to lean on. It's like, well, according to who and why? Because I know plenty of people who have had pretty, uneventful lives, but they still find something to bitch about, and they still find something that they can be unhappy with, because just by human nature, we have this propensity to find fault, to find negative things. They say it's the survival of the fittest. That's kind of like embedded in our evolution is, just like always on the outlook for negative and for danger. And so even we could be in the most safe space and still find something that we could be unhappy with. And then the reverse is true, right? You hear of people who have awful upbringings that you think, wow, I couldn't imagine being in their shoes, and they're happy and they're at peace with life. So, it's far be it for us to judge somebody on the outside looking in. And that's also something to remember, is that where we are is a huge reflection. Like how we are dealing with life is a huge reflection of how we're thinking about life. And that's another beautiful thing about coaching, is it helps you to think healthier thoughts. Ideally, if you have a good coaching relationship, it should help shift those thoughts that you're having.
Yeah. And just to clarify, when I said that, I was talking about from the perspective of the person who's having those thoughts, right? Because no one else can say, like, I can't say, oh, Nicolette's had a hard life or an easy life, right? It's all relative, right? So
exactly.
It's relative to the experience we're going through as well. So it's almost impossible to know what is a hard life, or despite what's happened. We're getting really deep here, but I think one of the things you're saying is, like, because we know it's all relative, mindset is everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I would like 100% say to everyone is, like, mindset is absolutely everything, because they're just events, right? It's up to you to determine whether the event is good, bad, or whatever, right? And depending on your philosophy, depending on how you approach life, I mean, some of the darker stuff that happens to us, there is a way you can frame it positively.
Yes.
And it's very controversial, some of it to us, but there is always a way you can frame it in a positive way or a negative way if it's a really amazing thing that seems like it's the most incredible thing ever. So it is perspective, fundamentally. What do you think, Seb? Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to quote Ally McBeal, right? What makes your problem so much bigger than anyone else's? They're mine. And it's, yep. I have discussions with my wife at times, and it's we can never discount or dismiss anyone's emotional reaction to something. As simple as, like, my wife had redecorated the living room, and there was this chair that she had bought me that I really liked, and there was no room for it in this new design, and she just wanted to throw it out because there was nowhere else in the house to put it. And she had bought it for me years ago as a Father's Day gift, and I was like, well, I'm emotionally attached to this chair. I don't really want to throw it out. And we had a bit of a discussion about, she wanted me to get to the point where it's like, oh, we'll have to throw it out. There's no other room in the house or whatnot. And she's saying, it's silly to feel that way about a chair. And I said, I'm not going to discuss with you how I feel about the chair. I feel stupid arguing how much I feel about this chair, but I do. And now what I'd like to discuss is what we're going to do now that I feel that way. Let's acknowledge it and then see what we're going to do now that we know how I feel. And we did end up getting rid of it because there was no other place to put it. But it's this notion of, well, you can't dismiss how someone feels. It's how they feel. It's a very concrete part of their reality. And until you address that, you can't really go forward because someone's going to pump the brakes, as it were.
And it's dynamic as well, right? That's something we have to take into account. So with objects, one of the cognitive biases we have is, before you have something, before you take ownership of it, you tend to value it less, right? Like, they've done loads of experiments where they give someone like a picture and they say, how much would you pay for this picture? And they're like, $20. And then they give them the picture for a week. And then they're like, oh, we want the picture back. And they like, no, like, because now they've got ownership of it and they feel connected to it. So then they're like, how much would you value this picture? And then they'll say, like, maybe $40 or $30, right? So that's changed just from the experience of owning it, right? And you talked about an object. So then when you're dealing with people, like, think about all the dynamics that are going on here. Mm-hmm. It's super complex.
So the beauty of this conversation that we're having here, we've gotten a little off topic. We were trying to answer that question of what isn't coaching, what is coaching. But this is such a lovely example of what coaching is, because oftentimes we start one place with a client and we end somewhere completely different, but it's powerful and it's created an opening for shift and change. And so this, even though we're a little off topic, this is a really great example of what a real coaching conversation would look like. So,
absolutely.
So I'm going to rein us back in.
Can I contribute a story to illustrate that?
Absolutely.
I worked with a client who came to me because they wanted networking advice they wanted to have networking advice so that they could continue to grow their business. They'd had some stagnation for about a year. And they thought if they were more targeted and focused, they could A, spend more time with their family, and B, be more effective at networking and resume this growth that they had stagnated. That didn't feel right to me. So we just kept poking and digging a little bit more, peeling the layers of the onions that we were talking about. And after a little while, we were talking about the fear that she had of leaving her family behind, right? She had to choose between growing her business or neglecting her family or being with her family, right? And she had this unconscious decision between the two. And when finally, when that was laid bare for her, well, it changed everything. Now she was able to prioritize all, discuss with her family what that meant to be there for them. And then you could just grow your business when, once you've got your hard landscape established. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, what was this painful and not quite clear, right? Idea of like, I'm struggling and I think networking is the answer. And all of a sudden it was like, oh no, you just need to make sure that you've clarified to you and yours what that means to be there for them. And then you can go off and grow as much as you want. And what a great example for your family, your kids to say like, this is how you grow a business and take care of your family at the same time.
Right.
So it's like, absolutely. It's a complete, it can take a complete right turn.
I think Seb's story there is really interesting because there's also different types of coaches, and we have to really consider this. There'll be coaches who will target a specific issue, right? So in that case, what was it again? What was the first thing she came to? Networking, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So let's say it's like you are a networking coach, right? I don't know if that exists, but let's say you are. Then some coaches would say, I'm a networking coach, and they'll go in and help solve the networking problem. Now, Seb's one is a bit deeper. It's going into like mindset and get like uncovering some stuff like what Rich Litvin would say, like exponential coaching, right? So it doesn't mean that one type of coaching is better than the other, although we'll probably have an opinion on that. But it's to acknowledge that there is a different type of coaching, and there's a spectrum of coaches out there. Some are tackling like strategy and tactics. Others are like mindset and going maybe a bit deeper into like uncovering some issues that people are having or things that are holding them back. So I think that's important to acknowledge, because there'll be people listening to this saying like, oh, I don't do that type of coaching. And that doesn't mean you're not a coach just because you don't do that type of coaching, right? You might have your style of coaching that it works, it gets results, it helps people, and it's effective, right? So it really depends on the way you want to approach it. And I think that's important to clarify.
So, yeah, I don't know about y'all, but I think this has been an awesome talk and conversation. And of course, every time I get with you guys, I learn more and more. So I really do appreciate all of this. I love this stuff. And for the listeners, I hope everybody enjoyed this just as much as I have. And I hope my fellow coaches enjoyed it as well. I'm looking forward to the future of this podcast and the conversations to come. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I agree with you, Marquis. I think we've gone fairly deep in some areas here, and I think it's only going to get deeper, to be honest. But hopefully it's very useful. It's useful to me just to even talk about this stuff, because it's made me think about things very differently. So I appreciate it from all you guys, listeners, of course.
Well, you guys are some of my favorite people ever. So I'm curious, if y'all could summarize coaching in 3 words or less, what would y'all say? What would you say, Trisha, coaching is?
Well, you put me in a box. I can't do 3 words. I had an idea. So I describe it as this. You and I are on a trail. You want to get to the top of this mountain, or you want to explore this path. And I just have a really good way of helping you navigate the terrain.
Like that.
Love that.
I'm going to try the 3 words thing.
Yeah.
Transformation, not information.
Way to show me up, Seb.
I love it.
I had it in my back pocket.
I'm going to go with minimal collaborative support.
And I'll go with empowerment, change, and possibilities.
That's cool.
I'm just going to go with deep realization.
Good. That's good.
Nicolette, you can't get out of it.
Yeah, right.
Well, I was so busy asking the question, I didn't think about it. Self-empowerment over victimhood.
I like it.
Good.
It was 4, technically.
Can I do my 3?
Sure.
Yeah.
Live life illuminated.
Oh,
I like that.
Love it.
love it.
Wonderful.
So I hope you guys loved this conversation as much as we did. And if you want to continue that conversation, find us on Facebook. Go and search for This Is Coaching Show. You'll find our group and you can come join the conversation, ask us any questions that you have, pitch in, let us know what you want to explore on the any future podcast. And we'd love to collaborate with you there. So find us on Facebook. This is Coaching Show. Until next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.